Okay, so if you're stuck feeling like you have to put on that brave face, even when you're crumbling inside, constantly being told to just choose happiness, well, this deep dive should help you find a path towards genuine resilience and peace. Today, we're exploring this really fascinating intersection of modern Stoicism and toxic positivity. Now, at first glance, they might seem kind of similar, both about keeping your chin up, right? But our sources reveal they're, well, worlds apart. And figuring out that difference is just crucial for navigating life's challenges authentically.
It really is. In this era of Instagram's constant good vibes only and that pressure to always look on the bright side, we're often encouraged to simply think positive. But what happens when that pressure, that slap on a smile, no matter how we truly feel thing, becomes this sort of falsely positive facade, one that actually does more harm than good?
Yeah.
It brings up a huge question for all of us. How do we genuinely cope with adversity instead of just, pushing down our real emotions?
That's exactly what we want to unpack here. Our sources, including some great bits from modern Stoicism versus toxic positivity, know the difference, should help us get why Stoics don't just fake smiles, and how a deep, honest realism is actually way more empowering than any kind of false optimism. So maybe let's start with Stoicism itself. For those maybe less familiar, can we quickly touch on its foundations? What's it really about at its core?
Yeah, good place to start. So Stoicism, at its heart, it's this ancient philosophy, founded by Zeno of Citium way back, like 300 BCE. And it was championed by figures from completely different walks of life. You've got Epictetus, who was a former slave, Seneca, a really powerful statesman, and even Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, writing his Meditations. Essentially, it teaches living in accordance with nature and virtue, focusing on what truly matters for a good life, a flourishing life. It centers on these four cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. These are the cornerstones for what they call eudaimonia, basically, human flourishing.
It's just fascinating that someone like Marcus Aurelius, an emperor with all that pressure, embodied such calm resilience. The sources mention how he'd remind himself each morning, like, okay, today I'm going to meet selfish people, dishonest people. Not to get depressed about it, but to practice patience and understanding. What really stands out is how practical this philosophy is, even for him.
Yeah.
How did they build that kind of strength?
Well, a key mental model for them, really distilled by Epictetus, is the dichotomy of control, basically. Some things are in our control while others are not. Simple idea, profound implications. We control our opinions, our choices, our desires, our aversions, our inner world, but we don't control external events, other people's behavior, twists of fate, health crises, that kind of thing.
Right, so wisdom for a Stoic is knowing that difference and focusing only on what you can actually influence your own responses. It really reminds me of the serenity prayer, which the sources point out is super close to what Epictetus was saying, this idea of like intensely focusing on our own responses and letting go of the obsessive worry over what we just can't control. That seems to be how they built this incredible resilience. I mean, modern psychologists have said Stoicism has long been virtually synonymous with resilience. They handled really tough stuff, poverty, illness, grief, anger, with grace.
Absolutely. And they didn't just hope for resilience, they trained for it. One of their most powerful techniques was this exercise called premeditatio malorum, which means basically intentionally imagining things that could go wrong, future hardships.
Whoa, okay. So not trying to be negative, but preparing.
Exactly. It wasn't about pessimism. It was about emotional preparation, lessening the shock if or when bad things actually happen.
So it's not about suppressing negative emotions, which I think is a common misconception. It's more about embracing the possibility of them.
Precisely. By visualizing hardships, a Stoic gets ready to face reality head-on, building this kind of calm fortitude.
Yeah, I remember reading Marcus Aurelius writing something like, I will look upon death or upon a comedy with the same expression of countenance. It's not about feeling nothing, right? It's about not letting external stuff totally dictate your inner state. The sources even explain how a Stoic sage, maybe suffering terribly, could still find their life worth living because their integrity, their ability to choose their response, that remained intact. It really makes you question our usual definition of happiness, doesn't it? For them, it's clearly something much deeper than just feeling good constantly.
You've hit it exactly. For Stoics, happiness, the eudaimonia, flourishing, isn't about constant pleasure or avoiding discomfort. That's often how we think of it today. Instead, it comes from living virtuously, using reason, even when things are tough. It's a more resilient kind of well-being. And to cultivate that, they also taught a form of cognitive reframing. Epictetus nailed this 2,000 years ago. It's not events that upset us, but rather our opinions about them.
Ah, okay. So like losing your job isn't inherently devastating. It's the judgment you attach, like this means I'm worthless, that causes the real pain. But if you reframe it maybe as an opportunity to find a better path, that allows for hope. Our sources link this directly to modern cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Exactly. It's about mastering your emotional responses by adjusting the stories you tell yourself about events, rather than just trying to squash the feelings down. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself that feelings like anger or fear often stem from his own internal judgments, judgments he could choose to revoke. This isn't faking positivity. It's cultivating an honest, stable perspective grounded in reality.
And it seems like modern Stoic writers, people like Donald Robertson and Ryan Holiday, they're really bringing these ideas back in a practical way, calling it things like resilience training and even boldly optimistic. Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way, that title basically echoes Marcus Aurelius. What stands in the way becomes the way. How does that work?
It's a powerful mindset. You don't deny the obstacle. You acknowledge it fully. Then you use your creativity, your courage, your virtue to turn it into an advantage, or at least find a path forward through it. This is tied to the concept of amor fati, which translates to love of fate. It's this attitude of, well, enthusiastic acceptance of whatever happens, good or bad, and then working to make the best of it.
There's that vivid example from the sources about Thomas Edison, right? After his whole factory burned down, instead of despairing, he apparently told his son something like, "Go get your mother. She'll never see a fire like this again," and claimed, "We've just got rid of a lot of rubbish."
Yeah.
He accepted the massive loss and immediately started thinking about rebuilding. That's not just being cheerful, that's good. What Pigliucci called unyielding realism combined with faith in one's ability to respond virtuously.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really crucial point, maybe debunking a myth. Stoicism is not about being an unemotional robot. That's a common misunderstanding. Stoics feel the whole range of human emotions. The goal isn't to not feel, it's to not be controlled by destructive emotions like irrational anger or paralyzing fear. They seek tranquility, ataraxia, and freedom from those toxic passions, apatheia, by confronting problems with rational understanding, not by pretending the problems or their feelings about them don't exist.
Okay, so an angry Stoic might think, right, I feel angry about this injustice. They wouldn't deny it, but then they'd say, okay, let me examine this anger, let me respond with reason, not let it push me into doing something foolish. Which is such a sharp contrast to just, plastering on a smile. Authenticity seems key. Marcus Aurelius himself warned against fake smiles, right? He emphasized genuine kindness. That distinction is huge, and it leads us perfectly into the other side of this, toxic positivity. What exactly is that, beyond just the fake smiles and good vibes?
Well, the sources define toxic positivity as this overgeneralized, excessive insistence on positivity. It's the kind that rejects all difficult emotions in favor of a cheerful and often falsely positive facade. It's positivity that feels performative, maybe inauthentic.
Right, and it creates this immense pressure, doesn't it? To seem happy, say optimistic things, even when you're really hurting inside. The intention behind it might even be good sometimes, but it ends up invalidating real, genuine emotions. It fosters this environment where people feel they have to suppress sadness or anger or fear, just pretend everything is okay, which ironically can make you feel more guilty and isolated.
Definitely. And we encountered it everywhere, don't we? Social media is full of just choose happiness posts. Some workplaces kind of frown on any negativity or criticism. Even well-meaning friends or family might respond to real difficulties with a quick, oh, just look on the bright side. These kinds of platitudes, while maybe well-intentioned, can feel incredibly dismissive. Imagine telling someone you're really anxious about potentially losing your job, and they just hit you with, just stay positive, everything happens for a reason. You feel totally unheard, right? Those comments shut down the conversation about your actual pain. They basically signal that your anxiety or your grief isn't welcome. One psychologist put it starkly. Toxic positivity minimizes and even denies any trace of human emotions that are not strictly happy or positive.
Yeah, the sources list some classic examples. That trite reassurance instead of real empathy, like, cheer up, others have it worse. Or those dismissive mantras, positive vibes only. Or forced happiness in public, like a workplace motivation Monday where everyone's chanting slogans but morale is in the basement. Or even the everything happens for a reason line when someone's grieving. That can feel so invalidating.
The fundamental problem here is that toxic positivity denies us permission to have authentic human feelings. Life inevitably includes difficulty, sickness, loss, injustice, sorrow. It just does. Pretending these things don't upset us is just a form of denial. And denial doesn't make the feelings vanish, it just shoves them underground, where they can fester and cause more problems later.
And research backs this up, right? Hiding or constantly ignoring negative feelings actually backfires. It intensifies stress on both the body and the mind. People who are always wearing that mask of positivity often report feeling lonely or fake. They might even end up lashing out eventually because it's all bottled up. I know sometimes I just want someone to say everything will be fine, even if I suspect it won't. But that impulse is exactly where the danger lies, isn't it? It avoids reality.
It absolutely is. And psychologists point to several specific harmful effects. First, it invalidates and shames people. Messages like happiness is a choice can make individuals feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with them for feeling pain, leading to shame and withdrawal. Second, it stifles real communication and support. In a strictly positive vibes only environment, people get scared to speak openly about problems. They hide things until they become crises. Friendships can stay shallow. Third, it ramps up guilt and loneliness. Being told to just look at the bright side when you're dealing with something heavy, like trauma or depression, can create self-blame and make you feel totally alone. And finally, it actually prevents growth. Negative emotions, while uncomfortable, often carry important messages. They signal that something needs attention, change, or healing. Denying them blocks that process.
Okay, so let's be super clear. Genuine positivity isn't the enemy here. Gratitude, hope, optimism, those are wonderful, healthy things. But the line gets crossed when positivity becomes, as the sources say, a mandate and a mask. When it's insincere or excessive positivity that avoids reality. Ah, like that therapist quipped, positivity is not positive when it denies, invalidates, or minimizes authentic emotions. A balanced approach has to acknowledge both the good and the bad. So now that we've got a clearer picture of both, let's really put them head to head. Despite maybe looking similar on the surface, Stoicism and toxic positivity seem fundamentally different in how they approach emotions and reality. How about we start with their attitude toward negative emotions?
Big difference there. Toxic positivity basically treats negative emotions like unwelcome guests. Ignore them, dismiss them quickly, just keep smiling, hide the pain. Stoicism, completely differently, teaches that we should acknowledge and examine negative emotions. Stoics don't see sadness, fear, or anger as signs of weakness. They see them as natural human responses that need to be understood and managed with reason. They even actively practice facing negative possibilities, remember the premeditatio malorum, to lessen their power and build that inner strength.
That makes total sense. So, dealing with adversity, someone leaning towards toxic positivity might react with denial, maybe that overly cheerful optimism. Like if a project at work is clearly failing, the toxically positive manager might just insist everything's fine, think positive, and refuse to even discuss the problems, which could make things much worse. How would the Stoic handle that same failing project?
The Stoic approach would be, okay, clear-eyed acceptance first. This is really happening. It's not what we wanted. No denial. But then, immediate rational assessment. What realistically can be done now? What's within our control? Their calm isn't naive optimism. It's an earned calm. It comes from taking constructive action where possible and practicing acceptance of what truly can't be changed, not from pretending the problem doesn't exist.
Okay, and what about control? Toxic positivity seems to carry this undertone, maybe from some self-help corners, that if you just think positive thoughts hard enough, you can bend reality to your will, like your mindset creates your reality.
Yeah, there can be a hint of magical thinking there sometimes. Stoicism, though, draws a very sharp line, the dichotomy of control again. Stoics don't pretend their thoughts alone will magically change external events. Instead, they focus all their energy on controlling their own choices, their judgments, their actions, their perceptions. In a way, Stoics have less illusion of control over the external world. They readily admit, yeah, fate might deal us some bad cards. But they find immense empowerment by focusing fiercely on their internal response, which is the one thing they do control.
And the ultimate goal seems different too. For toxic positivity, the goal feels like just feel good all the time, or at least look like you do. Happiness seems defined very superficially, lots of positive feelings, no negative ones.
Right, whereas in Stoicism, the goal isn't constant pleasure. It's tranquility, inner peace, ataraxia, and living virtuously. A Stoic would much rather do the right thing, the virtuous thing, even if it's difficult or uncomfortable, than fake a smile just for appearances. It really prioritizes being good over merely feeling good.
Which ties back to authenticity and honesty. Stoicism values being truthful with yourself and others. We saw Marcus Aurelius talking about genuine goodwill, not fake smiles. Stoics try to align their outward behavior with their rational understanding of reality.
Exactly. Toxic positivity, on the other hand, is often all about the facade. It's external facing. Wear the smile, say the happy things, no matter what's going on inside. And this can lead to that feeling of cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah.
That uncomfortable split between your real emotions and the ones you're showing the world. It creates this kind of emotional void.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Imagine two people lose their job, same situation. How might the toxic positivity approach look? Maybe the person forces a big grin, tells everyone, I'm not upset at all, I'm choosing to be positive, it's totally fine, everything will work out, no negativity allowed. They might even flood their social media with super upbeat posts about exciting new opportunities, while privately, they're feeling total panic.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Now, the Stoic approach, totally different. That person would likely first calmly acknowledge the reality and the feeling. Okay, this is a tough blow. I feel worried, maybe hurt. Acknowledge it. But then, almost immediately, pivot to what is in their control. Right, I can update my resume. I can reach out to my network. I need to adjust my budget. Action-oriented. They might even consciously use a Stoic exercise. Okay, premeditatio malorum. Worse things could happen. People have endured much worse and survived. How can I view this as an opportunity to grow or maybe find a better career path? The obstacle becomes the way. They might still feel anxious, absolutely, but they don't beat themselves up for feeling it. And importantly, if a friend asked how they were doing, the Stoic could likely say, candidly but constructively, I'm managing, it's definitely stressful, but I'm focusing on my next steps. Honesty, but with agency.
That contrast is so clear. So what does this all mean for us, for you listening? Why is the Stoic realism ultimately so much more empowering, more sustainable than the false optimism of toxic positivity?
Because when you confront reality squarely, the good, the bad, the ugly, you can actually adapt to it. You can learn from it. You can genuinely overcome challenges. When you live in denial or insist on only positive vibes all the time, you actually make yourself more fragile, more vulnerable to life's inevitable difficulties. Stoicism, as we've said, has this well-deserved reputation for building resilience. By regularly training themselves to face discomfort, maybe through voluntary hardship or mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios, Stoics develop this kind of emotional muscle. So when a real crisis hits, they have internalized coping strategies, ready-to-go breathing techniques, reframing thoughts, remembering the bigger picture, focusing on control, things that keep them grounded. And modern studies on resilience back this up, finding that accepting negative emotions actually tends to reduce their intensity over time, not increase it.
Yeah, it's easy to see the resilience link with Stoicism. But the flip side you mentioned is stark toxic positivity can make us brittle. If you spent your life pretending everything's fine, you might genuinely not have the tools or the practice to cope when things are definitively not fine. You haven't let yourself feel and process smaller sorrows, so a big one just bowls you over. And like you said, because toxic positivity often discourages reaching out for real support, people can find themselves incredibly isolated just when they need connection the most. Those surveys showing that I keep my emotions to myself correlates with lower well-being and higher depression. That's telling.
And this difference directly impacts our actions and outcomes. Stoic realism leads to effective problem solving. A Stoic leader facing a setback doesn't waste time on denial. They calmly assess, replan, work smarter. They focus on virtuous action within their control. And even if things still don't work out perfectly, they can practice acceptance of the outcome, knowing they did what they could. This preserves their inner peace.
Whereas the toxically positive approach, well, it can lead to inaction, right? Or just poor decisions like ignoring warning signs because acknowledging them feels too negative. This can obviously make the actual outcomes worse. And when reality inevitably breaks through that positive facade, the crash is much harder. It seems clear that realism, combined with a rational optimism about your own ability to respond, just yields better results in the long run than false optimism that refuses to even look at the problems.
Absolutely. And it connects to authentic happiness, too. Stoics understood that deep meaning and contentment come from being true to yourself and aligning with reality. Modern positive psychology actually echoes this, things like authenticity and the ability to experience and navigate the full range of human emotions are crucial for life satisfaction and mental health. Toxic positivity, by forcing that constant mask, leads to what psychologists sometimes call emotional labor. That draining effort of performing an emotion you don't feel. It contributes to burnout and, ironically, less actual happiness.
And the Stoic realism, that authenticity, it also fosters deeper connections with other people. When you're honest about your struggles in a measured, constructive way, not just complaining, you invite genuine support, real intimacy. Stoicism isn't about wallowing, but it definitely encourages honest communication and empathy. Remember Seneca and Marcus Aurelius writing about kindness, understanding, being made for one another?
And that honesty extends inward too, right? cultivating self-compassion instead of self-judgment for feeling bad.
Exactly. Whereas if you insist on positive vibes only, conversations tend to stay shallow. Friends might hesitate to share their real problems with you because they fear judgment or dismissal. By validating emotions, our own and others, we create that safe space needed for trust and genuine mutual support.
The sources used a really powerful metaphor to capture this difference in empowerment. Stoicism is like a solid rock, a promontory. The waves crash against it constantly, but it stands firm. It even tames the fury of the water around it. The Stoic ideal is to be that rock grounded in reality, unshaken by storms because it's built on truth and virtue. Yeah, I like that one. In contrast, toxic positivity is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It takes constant, exhausting effort to keep it down. That forced smiling, the denial. And when a really big wave hits, it's likely to slip out of your grasp and pop up chaotically, maybe even hit you in the face. The calm rock is resilience. The submerged beach ball is repression.
And accepting truth, accepting reality, it's actually liberating. Instead of wasting all that energy thinking or saying, this shouldn't be happening, you can shift to, okay, it is happening. Now what's the best I can do?
Hmm.
That redirects all your effort towards constructive responses. There's that saying, often wrongly attributed to Stoics, but fitting the spirit: pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The Stoics would certainly agree that fighting reality, denying it, that's what creates unnecessary suffering. Accepting reality, even painful reality, reduces suffering down to the unavoidable pain itself, which can then be borne, maybe even transformed.
Absolutely. Acknowledging a negative emotion often takes away some of its power, some of its sting. Whereas fighting it, resisting it, often just makes it persist or even get stronger. So realism, maybe counterintuitively, becomes a true friend to our emotional well-being.
It's so human to want to avoid discomfort, isn't it? But Stoicism seems to offer this gentle but firm reminder. You can endure discomfort. In fact, you probably must if you truly want to grow stronger and wiser. It aligns so well with what psychologists like Susan David talk about with emotional agility, being able to navigate the full spectrum of life's experiences, not just the easy ones. So, wrapping this up, this deep dive really highlights how modern Stoicism offers this potent antidote to the pitfalls of toxic positivity. It's a philosophy that says yes to all of reality, the good, the bad, everything in between, not just the shiny, happy parts. And by doing that, it teaches us how to navigate life's inevitable storms with real strength, real grace. Stoics don't waste energy faking smiles because they know a fake smile doesn't actually fix anything. What helps is sincere effort, clear perception, and virtuous action. It doesn't promise a life free from pain, but it does promise that you can develop the capacity to handle the pain that comes your way, and maybe even turn it into wisdom.
And on the flip side, just recognizing toxic positivity for what it is, that pressure to perform happiness allows us to reject it. We can give ourselves and the people around us permission to feel authentically whatever that emotion is without judgment. And as we've seen, that very authenticity, that acceptance of reality, actually opens the door to a more genuine, grounded kind of optimism, the kind that can coexist with realism. When you stop forcing the fake positivity, you create space to cultivate a deeper kind of joy. Maybe the joy that comes from aligning with truth, engaging with life fully, appreciating the good without having to deny the bad.
So, here's a small challenge for you listening. The next time you face some adversity, big or small, try to remember this difference. You don't need to plaster on a grin and pretend everything's perfect. That's the toxic positivity trap. Instead, you could try the stoic approach. Maybe pause, acknowledge it. Okay, this is tough, and it's okay that I feel upset or worried or angry about it. Validate the feeling, and then pivot. Now, what aspects of this situation are actually within my control? What's the right or virtuous thing to do next? That stance is both honest and deeply hopeful in a realistic way. That's the Stoic path. And it just might leave you with a genuine smile of resilience, not repression, once the storm has passed.